is that it was done because those who suffer came together and they picked up others that didn't suffer and together created people's movements that changed this nation, and it must be done again. Martin's was a people's movement. Look, for instance, if you're black in America, I'm talking about necessary things. And is that with a couple million people in jail, great burden of your men in jail, right? Are they ever going to get an education? We all know it, right? Is that add the fact, right, that it's not only about that, being in jail, right? But it's about how many are so poorly educated because we've allowed laws to go in that the community doesn't educate but those in their neighborhoods. The rich don't have to come out to educate people in various parts of this country but their own and those like them. Is that add it up. Poor whites are suffering too. We just don't talk about that as much. Is that, you know why? Because they don't have any leadership. Because as soon as white boys get theirs, they forget where they came from. Am I right? Do they go back to the old neighborhood? Only to drink with the boys every now and then. Right? And then they go, right? And they certainly don't want to live with poor white people because they're better off now. That's right. And we're doing some of that imitation stuff too, right? All right? Is that what I'm saying is that it's necessary to have sinners to educate, not in the old form, but to fit the new needs. In fact, fewer white men are going to college now because the kind of college education we got doesn't necessarily fit their need for the time in which we live. What are we going to do? We have to be able to see it, and if we can do it together, where is it? Let's look at the agenda that Martin King gave us. And I'm going to do this quickly, believe me. Please don't. Let's look at Martin King left us with an agenda. Remember when Martin left, he said, where do we go from here? See, Martin wasn't concerned about his own death. It's where do we go from here? He knew he was going to die. He knew they was going to kill him sooner or later. But that wasn't an important thing. Where do we go from here? It isn't important what we did do. What are we going to do? That's what's important, right? And Martin says that there's three things we must do that in order, and we must fit into the agenda that Martin King had. Martin King left an agenda. He spoke about 3 points. The end of racism. Now, we think that's easy because we passed all the laws, but you see, it is a left-hand movement, but the spiritual part of it is not finished, and it can't be finished until the moral and spiritual part of it is ended. That's what is going to be necessary for us in our own time, to back up lawyers, but as individuals to deal with the moral and spiritual part of it all. And you can't be passive and do that. You've got to speak out. Let's look at it another way, is that you have to see how difficult it is, and those people that say, well, there's racism's all over. Well, President Reagan went to Philadelphia, Mississippi to start his campaign. Another president sold the nation on a black stereotype to get elected. President Bush came to Michigan to try and stop affirmative action. The promise that America made. Oh, is it over? Is it over? No, it is not over, and it won't be over until we sell this nation on what? Truth and justice. That's what we must do. See, it's 48% of this nation, 48 to 52% says it's spiritual, right? Religion is an old word, you know that. We're all spiritual now, right? We don't know how we got that, but we're all spiritual, right? All right. Is that? But I tell you what, if we're so spiritual, let us win one person each. We can get rid of whatever we want. Now, the second thing, we are winning. Did you see the newspaper the day before yesterday? 2 presidents got together to start. I know I see a sister that knows the new Baptist Convention. Now, what's that all about? No, it's called the New Baptist Convention. Right? Now, what's that all about? It's about this, is that across this nation what we find is that the rails of racism, the rails of racism, that racism rides on rails of racism, and the lack of truth and justice. Let me say it another way, because I got it mixed up. Right? Let me say it another way. Is that religion has now become the most important thing for politics in this nation. Right? And if we can't destroy the myths and the lies, we can't destroy the stereotypes that's involved in belief systems in this nation, we can't win anything that's social justice, right? It's that simple, that those who are supposed to be talking truth and justice and love are not. And they have strong structures that are causing more destruction than they are liberty and truth, right? Who's going to face it? Got to face it, right? It's got to be faced. We can't afford to have lies as a basic part of daily American structure making decisions on life. Let's look at it another way, right? Martin says that you have to get rid of war and violence. And Bush thought that that's just some words, something for Sunday morning. And he's religious and all that. Right? If you don't believe him, ask him. And he says, when we ask him, how do you know? He said, because I feel it. Right? So does every racist. All right? Point is, so what? Right? Does that change anything? Right? In the final analysis, what have you done? Right? What do you really believe? Right? Not just that there's a God in the sky, right? Not that I go to a church, right? What are you really about? But religion is going to control. How do we end that? We have to face it, quite like we had to face racism. We got to fight that issue out. We have too long hid religious understandings. We let anybody believe anything, no matter whether it led to death or life, right? There has to be a thorough examination of our belief systems. I don't care which one it is. And I know mine needs it. Of course, not in my church. It's true of other churches like it. But is that what we have to see is that the spiritual struggle against racism is the number one issue in my religion of Christianity. And I think it's the number one issue across the world today, regardless of faith. All right? Is that it is the number one spiritual issue that dominates. Secondly, the end of violence and war. I started on it. Bush thought that it didn't matter. And that he doesn't have to worry. You can go anywhere you want to and kill anybody you want to. All you have to do is have a big enough gun. Have enough troops. He's found out he doesn't have enough troops. He's found out that they don't welcome in people like him. And that the day of empire is over. Bush thought that he didn't realize. He thought that the prophets were dead. He thought he'd been at the funeral that buried Martin King. But Martin King is still alive. And Bush wants to commit suicide. He's just too scared. All right? Well, that's true. We're just close to truth. The idea is true, right? See? What we have to understand is that Presidents die, but prophets don't die.